Former President Donald Trump launched a bold, America First trade strategy, wielding tariffs as his main weapon. He aimed to revive U.S. industries and bring manufacturing jobs back by taxing imports, especially from China. The administration promised that tariffs would help American farmers by opening foreign markets for their products. Critics warned that tariffs would spark retaliation and hurt the very industries they were meant to protect, especially agriculture. Despite warnings, the administration pressed on, framing the fight as a battle for economic sovereignty. For farmers in the Midwest, it was a risky gamble. Patriotism now, with hopes of prosperity later. In a calculated move, China struck back with precision, targeting the very backbone of American agriculture, especially soybeans, by imposing steep tariffs. This wasn't just a random choice. Soybeans are a cornerstone crop for U.S. farmers and a major export to China, making them a strategic target in the escalating trade war. Practically overnight, U.S. farmers found themselves cut off from their largest and most lucrative market. Prices for crops like soybeans plummeted, leaving many farmers staring at financial ruin as their harvests lost value and their future became uncertain. Billions of dollars in losses swept across the Farm Belt. Contracts that once promised stability suddenly became worthless, and unsold crops piled up in silos and storage bins, with nowhere to go. The ripple effects were felt in every rural community. China's strategy was unmistakable: hit the heartland, where it would hurt the most, to put maximum pressure on Washington and force a change in U.S. policy. And it wasn't just soybeans. The tariffs extended to pork, corn, wheat, and cotton, crops and industries that are pillars of rural America, supporting entire communities and generations of farm families. The front lines of the trade war ran straight through America's fields and small towns, turning what began as a policy dispute into a full-blown economic crisis for thousands of families. For many, the threat wasn't just lost income, but the loss of their farms and their way of life. China's message was unmistakable: if you target our industries, we'll strike at your most vulnerable voters, those who depend on agriculture and rural economies. The battle lines of this economic conflict were drawn deep in the soil of America's heartland, where every sunrise brought new uncertainty, and every field became a symbol of the larger struggle between two global powers. For farmers like John Heistorfer in Iowa, the trade war meant watching a lifetime's hard work slowly evaporate. Soybeans rotted in fields or overflowed silos, as prices crashed and vital markets vanished overnight. Bankruptcies rose, and government aid offered only a temporary lifeline. Farmers wanted fair trade, not just checks. Many felt like pawns, their livelihoods sacrificed for a distant geopolitical fight beyond their control. The crisis was personal: lost income, sleepless nights, and the painful sale of family equipment just to survive. The trade war wasn't just policy, it was a daily struggle for survival in rural America's heartland. The U.S. China trade war sent shockwaves through global supply chains, disrupting the flow of goods and raw materials that businesses around the world had come to rely on for decades. Suddenly, the established routes and partnerships that kept shelves stocked and factories humming were thrown into chaos. The conflict didn't just affect the two superpowers. It strained ties with key allies like Canada and Mexico, who found themselves caught in the crossfire of escalating tariffs and shifting trade policies. U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum hit not just China, but also America's closest partners, sparking anger, confusion, and a sense of betrayal among long-standing allies. Businesses and workers in these countries suddenly faced new costs and uncertainty. As China turned to Brazil and Argentina for soybeans, seeking alternative suppliers to bypass U.S. tariffs, U.S. farmers lost market share, possibly for good. Many American growers watched as years of hard-won relationships with Chinese buyers evaporated almost overnight, leaving them with surplus crops and falling prices. International companies scrambled to reroute supply chains, rethinking their sourcing strategies and searching for new partners in a rapidly changing landscape. They faced new tariffs, regulatory hurdles, and a climate of uncertainty that made long-term planning nearly impossible. The disruption exposed the fragility of global trade, revealing just how interconnected and vulnerable the world's economies had become. It also accelerated a shift toward regionalization, as countries and companies look to build more resilient local supply networks to reduce risk. Tariffs meant to punish China often hurt allies and American businesses, leading to layoffs, higher prices, and a wave of uncertainty for small and large companies alike. The trade war revealed the tangled web of modern commerce, where a single policy change could ripple across continents and industries. For Canada and Mexico, the trade war was a stark reminder of their economic dependence on U.S. China relations and the need to diversify their own trade partnerships for future stability. In the end, the world's supply chains would never be the same. The lessons learned during this period continue to shape how nations and businesses approach global trade today, with resilience and adaptability now more important than ever. When the U.S. imposed steep tariffs on Chinese goods, China quickly adapted, finding creative ways to keep its products flowing into the American market. One of the most effective strategies was rerouting goods through countries like Mexico and Vietnam, using these nations as intermediaries to dodge U.S. tariffs and keep trade channels open. These countries became vital links in a new, complex supply chain. By performing minor assembly, repackaging, or simply relabeling products in these third countries, Chinese goods could enter the U.S. under new labels. This clever maneuver exploited loopholes in trade regulations, making it difficult for authorities to track the true origin of products. To further cement their presence, Chinese firms invested heavily in factories abroad, setting up operations in Mexico, Vietnam, and other countries. These investments allowed them to maintain access to the lucrative North American market and deepen their reach into North American supply chains, blending Chinese-made components with local materials to further obscure the product's origins. U.S. customs officials struggled to trace the true origins of these goods, often overwhelmed by the sheer volume and complexity of global shipments. As enforcement became a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, smugglers and companies constantly adapted to new regulations, staying one step ahead of authorities. Much of this activity skirted the edges of international law, exploiting gray areas and making detection even more difficult for regulators. China's maneuvers revealed that tariffs alone couldn't untangle the deep, intertwined economic ties between the two nations. The global economy had become too interconnected for simple solutions. The roots of global trade ran far deeper than any single policy could sever, showing that international commerce is a complex web, not easily unraveled by tariffs or regulations alone. China's circumvention tactics forced the U.S., Mexico, and Canada to rethink their approach. The upcoming USMCA review is a chance to build a united North American front against unfair trade. Proposals include harmonizing tariffs, tightening rules of origin, and boosting customs enforcement. The goal: close loopholes and prevent countries from serving as backdoors for Chinese goods. A coordinated investment screening process could block tariff-dodging factories. The challenge is to strengthen external defenses without disrupting the integrated North American market. The USMCA review will test whether a true North American economic fortress can be built. The trade war taught U.S. agriculture the risks of relying on a single market like China. Farmers are now seeking new buyers in Asia, Africa, and Latin America to diversify and protect against future shocks. Even if tariffs end, lost market share and trust may never fully return. The conflict blurred the lines between trade and national security, putting farmers on the front lines of a global rivalry. The sector is more resilient and diversified, but scars remain. The future will be shaped by a tug-of-war between globalization and regionalization. For American farmers, adapting to this new world is the ultimate test of lessons learned.